In this video, we'll break down two AI stocks quietly minting millionaires right now while most investors are still distracted by the obvious names. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why these companies could still be in the early stages of a massive long-term wealth creation cycle. These are not speculative startups or hype-driven plays. These are companies sitting at the center of one of the most important technological shifts in decades. They power the infrastructure behind artificial intelligence, data centers, and next-generation computing. The kind of businesses that do not just participate in growth, but define it. Let's start with the first one. Advanced Micro Devices, ticker symbol AMD. Before you even look at the numbers, you need to understand why this business matters. Because this is not just a chip company. This is a company that has positioned itself at the heart of the AI compute revolution. Every major shift in technology has a backbone. The internet had servers, mobile had smartphones, AI has compute power, and compute power at scale requires advanced chips that can handle enormous workloads efficiently. That is where AMD comes in. For years, AMD was seen as the underdog, a distant second in markets dominated by larger competitors. But that narrative has quietly flipped. And the reason it flipped is because AMD did not just try to compete. It focused on building better performance, better efficiency, and better value for customers that operate at massive scale. Today, AMD is deeply embedded in data centers, cloud infrastructure, and increasingly in artificial intelligence workloads. And here is where things start to get interesting. The demand for AI is not just growing, it is exploding. Every company is trying to integrate AI into its operations, from automating workflows to building entirely new products. But none of that happens without the hardware layer. And the hardware layer is constrained. There are only a handful of companies in the world that can design and deliver high-performance chips at scale. AMD is one of them. That alone gives it a powerful competitive advantage. Now let's talk about what is actually driving growth. AMD's data center segment has become one of the most important parts of its business. This is where hyperscalers, large enterprises, and AI-focused companies spend billions of dollars to build out their infrastructure. And AMD has been steadily gaining share in this space. Its EPYC processors have become increasingly competitive, offering strong performance and energy efficiency. And in a world where data centers are consuming massive amounts of power, efficiency is not just a nice-to-have, it is a critical advantage. But the real shift is happening in AI accelerators. AMD has been investing heavily in its AI chip lineup, particularly with its Instinct series. These chips are designed specifically to handle AI training and inference workloads, the exact kind of workloads that are growing at an unprecedented rate. As AI adoption expands, demand for these chips is expected to surge, and here is the key point most investors miss. This is not a one-time growth spike. This is the beginning of a multi-year infrastructure build-out. Think about it like this. When cloud computing first started gaining traction, companies did not just buy servers once and stop. They continuously expanded capacity as demand grew. AI is following a similar path. That means companies like AMD are not just selling products. They are participating in an ongoing cycle of demand that compounds over time. Now let's bring in some numbers to ground this. AMD has seen strong momentum in its data center business, with revenue growth being driven by increased adoption of its processors and AI solutions. The company has also been improving its margins, which is critical because it shows that growth is not coming at the expense of profitability. Higher margins mean more cash flow. More cash flow means more reinvestment into research and development, and that creates a feedback loop that strengthens its competitive position. Another important factor is AMD's ability to execute. This is not a company that is just promising future growth. It has a track record of delivering products that compete at the highest level. And in an industry where execution is everything, that matters. Now let's talk about the long-term picture. If you believe that AI is going to continue expanding into every industry, then you have to ask yourself one question: who benefits the most from that expansion? The answer is not always the companies building AI applications. It is often the companies providing the infrastructure that makes those applications possible. AMD is one of those infrastructure providers, and because of that, its growth potential is tied not just to one product or one market, but to the entire AI ecosystem. That is a much bigger opportunity. But of course, no investment is without risk. AMD operates in a highly competitive industry. Innovation cycles are fast, and staying ahead requires constant investment. There is also the challenge of supply chains and manufacturing, which can impact the ability to meet demand. However, these risks are balanced by the scale of the opportunity. And this is where the idea of quietly minting millionaires comes into play. Most investors chase the obvious winners after they have already made their biggest moves. But the real wealth is often created by identifying companies that are still in the early stages of a long-term trend. AMD fits that description. It is not unknown, it is not obscure, but it is still early in its AI-driven growth cycle. And that combination of strong fundamentals, growing demand, and long-term relevance is exactly what you want in a compounding investment. Now here is something else to think about. As AI becomes more integrated into everyday life, the demand for compute power does not just increase linearly, it accelerates. More applications lead to more usage leads to more data requires more processing power, and that creates a flywheel effect. Companies like AMD sit at the center of that flywheel, which means their growth is not just driven by initial adoption, but by the ongoing expansion of the entire ecosystem. That is a powerful position to be in, and it is one of the reasons why long-term investors are paying close attention, because when you find a company that is both essential to a major trend and still early in its growth curve, you are looking at the kind of opportunity that can compound wealth over time, not overnight. Not through speculation, but through sustained, consistent growth, and that is how millionaires are quietly made in the market. Now before we move on to the second stock, here is something important. If this resonates with you, you're exactly who this channel is for. Please hit the like button, share the video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next important financial investing update. Remember to do your own research before you invest in any stock. Now let's move on to the second company. Micron Technology, ticker symbol MU. At first glance, Micron might not seem as exciting as some of the companies dominating AI headlines. It does not build flashy consumer products. It is not constantly in the spotlight, and that is exactly why so many investors overlook it. But if you really understand how artificial intelligence works under the hood, you start to realize something critical. AI does not just need processing power, it needs memory, a lot of it. Every AI model, every data center, every large-scale computation relies on the ability to store, access, and move massive amounts of data at incredible speeds. And that is where Micron comes in. Micron is one of the world's leading producers of memory and storage solutions. Specifically, it focuses on DRAM and NAND flash memory. These are not optional components in the AI ecosystem. They are essential. Without memory, even the most powerful AI chips cannot function efficiently. So while companies like AMD provide the brains of AI systems, Micron provides the memory that allows those systems to think, learn, and operate at scale. That puts Micron in a very unique position. It is not competing directly with AI chip designers. It is supplying a critical piece of the puzzle that every AI system depends on. And as AI workloads become more complex, the demand for high-performance memory is increasing rapidly. Now here is where things get really interesting. The type of memory required for AI is not the same as traditional memory used in everyday devices. AI workloads require faster speeds, higher bandwidth, and greater efficiency. Micron has been investing heavily in developing advanced memory technologies that meet these requirements. This includes high-bandwidth memory, which is specifically designed to support AI and data center applications. As demand for AI accelerates, so does the demand for this kind of specialized memory. And that creates a powerful growth driver for Micron. Now let's talk about the business cycle, because this is something that often scares investors away from memory stocks. The memory industry has historically been cyclical. Prices go up when demand is strong, then fall when supply catches up. But here is what is changing. AI is introducing a new layer of demand that is more persistent and less tied to traditional cycles. Instead of relying primarily on consumer devices like smartphones and PCs, memory demand is increasingly being driven by data centers and AI infrastructure, and these are long-term investments. Companies are not building data centers for short-term use. They are building them to support years of growth. That shifts the demand profile in a meaningful way. Now let's bring in some numbers to understand the current situation. Micron has been coming out of a downturn in the memory cycle, and its financial performance has been improving as demand recovers. Revenue growth has been supported by stronger pricing and increased demand for advanced memory products. At the same time, the company has been focused on managing supply and controlling costs, which is important in maintaining profitability through different phases of the cycle. One of the key metrics to watch with Micron is pricing power. As demand for high-performance memory increases, Micron has the ability to command higher prices for its products. That directly impacts its margins and overall profitability. And as AI adoption continues to grow, that pricing power could become more sustainable. Another important factor is capital discipline. Memory manufacturing requires significant investment. Building and maintaining fabrication facilities is expensive. But Micron has been more disciplined in managing its capital expenditures, which helps balance supply and demand. This is important because it reduces the risk of oversupply, which has historically been a challenge for the industry. Now let's step back and look at the bigger picture. If AI continues to expand as expected, the amount of data being generated and processed will increase exponentially. That data has to be stored, it has to be accessed quickly, and it has to be moved efficiently across systems. All of that relies on memory. So while processors often get most of the attention, memory is just as critical to the overall performance of AI systems. And this is where Micron quietly becomes a key player in the AI revolution. It is not the company making headlines, but it is one of the companies enabling the entire ecosystem to function. And that is exactly the kind of business that can create long-term value, because it is not dependent on a single product or trend. It is embedded in the foundation of a much larger shift. Now let's talk about why this matters for investors. When you are looking for long-term opportunities, you want companies that benefit from structural trends, not just short-term hype. AI is a structural trend, and Micron's role in providing memory solutions positions it to benefit from that trend in a meaningful way. At the same time, because it is less talked about compared to some other AI companies, it may not be as fully priced in by the market. That creates potential for upside. But again, it is important to stay grounded. Micron is still subject to industry cycles, pricing can fluctuate, and demand can shift based on broader economic conditions. However, the introduction of AI-driven demand adds a new layer of support that could help stabilize the business over time, and that is what makes this opportunity different from the past. Now here is something else to consider. As AI models become more advanced, they require more data to train and operate. This increases the need for memory capacity and performance. That means the demand for Micron's products is not just growing, it is evolving. Higher-end memory solutions typically come with higher margins. So as the product mix shifts toward more advanced technologies, Micron's profitability could improve. And that creates another lever for long-term growth. When you combine all of this, you start to see why Micron fits into the theme of quietly minting millionaires. It is a company that plays a critical role in a major technological shift. It has clear growth drivers tied to that shift, and it is still early enough in the cycle for long-term investors to benefit, not because of hype, but because of fundamentals. Now, after looking at both of these companies, you can start to see a pattern. They are not just riding the AI wave, they are building the infrastructure that makes the wave possible, and that is a very different kind of opportunity. Before we wrap this up, there is something important I want to share with you. This video is brought to you by Value Stocks Investing Master Course. If you're looking to grow your wealth by investing in solid, undervalued stocks but not sure where to start, I created the Value Stocks Investing Master Course to teach you how to identify great companies, make smart investment decisions, and build a portfolio that lasts. Click the link in the description and pinned comments to get the course today and take control of your financial future. Now that you have seen how both of these companies operate, it is time to connect the dots and understand what this really means for you as a long-term investor. Because the biggest mistake most people make in the market is looking at stocks in isolation. They look at one company, one chart, one headline, and try to make a decision based on that. But real wealth is built by understanding systems. And what you are looking at here is not just two individual companies. You are looking at two critical layers of the same system. On one side, you have advanced micro devices building the compute power that drives artificial intelligence. On the other side, you have Micron Technology supplying the memory that allows that compute power to function at scale. One handles processing, the other handles data, and together they form the backbone of modern AI infrastructure. That is a powerful place to be. Because when you invest in infrastructure, you are not betting on which application wins. You are betting on the growth of the entire ecosystem. Think about how this plays out over time. As more companies adopt AI, they need more computing power. That increases demand for advanced processors. At the same time, those AI systems generate and process enormous amounts of data. That increases demand for high-performance memory. These two forces reinforce each other. More compute leads to more data requires more memory enables more complex AI models, and those models require even more compute. This is not a linear growth curve, this is exponential, and companies positioned at the center of this loop are not just growing with the trend, they are compounding with it. That is where the real opportunity lies. Now here is something that separates average investors from great ones. Average investors chase what is already obvious. They wait until a trend is fully validated, widely talked about, and priced into the market. Great investors look for the second layer. They ask, who is quietly benefiting behind the scenes? Who is enabling this entire shift to happen? That is exactly what you are seeing with AMD and Micron. These are not speculative bets. These are companies with real products, real demand, and real cash flows. But more importantly, they are tied to a trend that is likely to persist for years, not months. Now let's talk about time horizon. Because this is where most people get it wrong. The idea of millionaire maker stocks often gets misunderstood. People think it means finding something that explodes overnight. That is not how it usually works. The reality is much simpler and much more powerful. Wealth is built through compounding. You identify strong businesses early in their growth cycle, you hold them as they execute, and you allow time to do the heavy lifting. AMD and Micron are not guaranteed to make anyone a millionaire. No stock is, but they have the characteristics that have historically been present in companies that create long-term wealth. Strong positioning in a growing industry, clear demand drivers, the ability to scale over time, and the potential to improve profitability as they grow. Now here is another angle that most people overlook. When you invest in companies like these, you are not just buying into their current business, you are buying into their future optionality. AMD is not limited to its current product lineup. As AI evolves, it has the opportunity to expand into new areas, develop new architectures, and capture more share. Micron is not limited to traditional memory markets. As data demands increase, it can innovate in higher performance solutions that command better margins. This ability to evolve is critical. Because the companies that create the most value over time are the ones that adapt and expand along with the industries they serve. Now let's address something important. Why are these opportunities still available? If the potential is so strong, why has everyone not already piled in? The answer is simple, because the market is not perfectly efficient. It is driven by attention, and attention is often focused on the most obvious stories. Right now, a lot of attention is concentrated on a handful of high-profile AI names. That leaves less attention for the companies operating just beneath the surface. But over time, fundamentals tend to win. As revenue grows, as margins improve, and as these companies continue to execute, the market eventually catches up. And when it does, the revaluation can be significant. That is where long-term investors benefit. Now think about your own strategy. Are you trying to chase short-term moves, or are you trying to build something that compounds over years? Because those are two very different approaches. If your goal is long-term wealth, then the focus should be on identifying businesses that can grow consistently and sustainably. And more importantly, holding them long enough for that growth to materialize. That requires patience. It requires conviction. And it requires understanding what you own. That is why it is so important to go beyond surface-level analysis, to understand not just what a company does, but why it matters, and how it fits into the bigger picture, because when you have that clarity, it becomes much easier to stay invested through volatility. Now here is a question worth asking yourself. What happens if AI continues to expand faster than expected? What happens if demand for compute and memory accelerates even more? In that scenario, companies like AMD and Micron are not just beneficiaries, they are leverage points. Their growth could outpace the broader trend because they are so deeply embedded in it. That is where the upside comes from. Not from speculation, but from positioning. Now before we close this out, let's make this interactive. Between these two companies, which one do you believe has the stronger long-term advantage? Is it AMD with its focus on high-performance computing and AI accelerators? Or is it Micron with its essential role in memory and data storage? Drop your answer in the comments and explain your reasoning, because the way you think about these businesses will shape how you invest moving forward, and that conversation is where real learning happens. If you want exclusive stock tips, in-depth analysis, real-time trade alerts, and free investing guides, join the Stocks Galore Patreon today and take your investing game to the next level. Our members get full in-depth analysis on most of the stocks mentioned here. Head over to patreon.com/stocksgalore and become part of our growing community of smart investors. Link is in the description. Do not forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you do not miss the next important investing update. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.